All right. I'm Brad.
I'm Scott.
This is Curiosity.
We're here with Natalie. Natalie, thanks for being on the show with us.
Thanks for having me.
Super stoked to have you on.
We've mixed it up a little bit. I feel like I'm kind of in the hot seat. I realize that we put these guests on this like pivot thing here that I'll try and navigate. But
this is actually a takeover. You're on the podcast, and Natalie and I are
what's
you
happening
today.
But one of the last episodes that we did, there was another event going on, and so like all the kit was gone, so it was just the audio version of the podcast. So it's kind of fun to have the lights back and kind of have the whole setup in place.
It was kind of strange not having the whole setup.
Yeah.
It felt a little weird.
Well, I record my podcast with no setup, so this is extremely different for me.
I remember when I was on the podcast with you.
Yeah.
It was cool though. I was a little nervous because I was the first podcast. I've done like radio, but I've never been on a podcast before. And I'm not a super nervous person, but
I've never been different. Well, that's not true. It's rare that I'm on this side of a podcast. Usually I'm in control, but
yeah.
Well, we're excited to have you on. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we'll link Brad's podcast guest in the show notes so that the audience can go and check out that piece of archival footage if it's still available.
Yeah.
And
we can do that.
We'll make that happen. So Brad, you want to kick off the conversation with
I would love to. So Natalie, really stoked to have you here with us today. The voice of innovation here in Houston.
Yep.
As I believe they say.
Technically, Innovation Map is the voice, but I am Innovation Map. So I guess I'm the voice of innovation.
By extension.
I'm going to argue that you are the face and the voice of Innovation Map. I feel like all the humans would definitely validate that as well.
Would agree.
So as we really kick off today, curiosity, right? If we look at the role that curiosity plays in our human experience, it's so beautiful. It's so powerful. From 0 to 5, it's everywhere, right? We're curious about everything that we see and touch and experience because for the very first time, we're seeing and touching and experience things. As we go through life, sometimes it can fade out. And so we're on this pretty cool mission. I was thinking of a different word than mission, but ambition maybe, to bring curiosity back into the fabric of humanity and make it core to our daily lives. And so we're really excited to learn from you today what the role that curiosity's played in your own life, just as a human being, as Natalie Harms. Like what have been the cool moments where curiosity's been pivotal in helping you navigate a different direction or guide you along a certain path or open up new opportunities or whatever it might be, as just exciting as you're willing to go on this journey with us, or as excited as we are to go on this journey with you, I guess I should say. I'm pretty jazzed to just kind of open up and hear a little bit about why you get out of bed every day. And
Yeah.
Well,
when you first told me about this podcast, I thought, I don't know how I'm curious, but then I realized I literally have one of the most perfect jobs to discuss that, because I think of curiosity as someone who learns about the world and the people around them, wants to do that, wants to seek out that information and asks a lot of questions. And my entire job has been based off of asking questions of people and then writing them. And I sought out that career because I love learning about people, places, and things. And I love providing that information for people. And it's also a type of job where no day is ever the same.
Yeah. And just thinking about what I know of your journey, not only do you bring curiosity to Innovation Map, but you also bring curiosity to the social media world in a couple different ways now, which is super cool. You have a pretty successful social media platform with It's Not Hugh, and also your really cool book one as well.
Yeah.
So
I'm overexposed, realistically. Just too many social media things.
So I would say you were like the epitome of a very curious human, and have found really cool ways to really bring curiosity to life, which is super exciting.
Yeah. I think social media is a little sick of me. I have a little bit too much of a presence, but I can't help it. It's like a natural extension. I don't know if it's generational or anything, but yeah, I just, I've always wanted this information and the things that I provide information on. You know what I mean? It's like almost selfish what I do, because I'm like, I'm interested in this, so I'm going to assume everybody else is and put this information out there.
There's kind of a common thread in a number of those things, and I'm a follower of It's Not You, It's Me, and there's kind of a storytelling thread. and certainly with Innovation Map and the telling the stories of innovators around the city. And is there sort of an early experience or a spark, if you will, that you kind of discovered that storytelling was kind of a passion or a thing, or what's kind of
that's a good question.
that origin story?
I'm unique in that I've always known what I wanted to do, even if I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I remember starting high school and thinking I got to immediately get on the newspaper at St. Agnes Academy where I went, and I was like, I got to go. Like, where do I sign up? I asked around, and they were like, oh, it's upperclassmen only. You can't join until you were a junior. And so I joined when I was a junior and senior, but I remember thinking like, I want to do this job in the future. So as early as, freshman year of high school, I knew very strongly that that's what I wanted. And then everyone told me that I was going to change my mind 10 times over. And I don't know, I kind of doubled down because I was like, you don't know me. I'm going to make this happen. Like I'm
Challenge
going
accepted.
to do. Yeah, exactly. Never changed my major in college, never even considered it. And sometimes I almost wonder if I should have and maybe just like minored in journalism, because there's only so much you could do with, 4 years of dedicated journalism curriculum. And so I really don't know what actually sparked the idea other than just witnessing on TV journalists and thinking, yeah, I could do that. Or that sounds interesting. That sounds unique. Like that sounds like a different type of job. And so that's where I kind of got that idea, and I just stuck with it.
So it's kind of something that you observed as like, hey, this is something I would love to go do or be a part of, or that I could accomplish.
Yeah.
Or there, as you have kind of spent your career and your education in that area, how have you seen sort of the evolution of kind of these platforms from sort of talking news head on, broadcast television to some of the platforms that you're working on today?
It's a really interesting industry, and I feel like there's so much at risk, but also just like at play in the entire industry, because it's evolved so much. I'm not old, but I'm like kind of older than some of these changes. Like I remember when
Jay-Z says 40's the new 20s. So
okay, sounds
I
good.
mean, I'm just saying, I think we're all younger than we think.
I know,
we are.
but I do think about that sometimes. I was like, even social media, where I'm like, I feel a little further removed than I did 5 years ago, where I don't necessarily feel like I'm an expert anymore. I mean, I know that there are parts that I can still do, and I'm a quick adapter, but like, yeah, there's some things where I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can hang in this next phase of social media, for instance. But in journalism, I made a switch about 3 years ago from a print first publication to a digital only. And I thought, actually, in retrospect, I don't think I thought about that hard enough. I just like did it. I just went for it. But it is a huge change. And like,
we're really glad you did. Just cannonball in, by the way.
I'm glad too. Oh, I was ready to go. I was like, I had some mentors that I consulted with about joining this like non-existent online publication. And they were like, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And I was like, oh, no, but I'm still going to do it because it felt super right. But there's also, looking back on it, I was like, I really did switch from the dream that I always had, which was to see my name in print, to, this online medium that is not super different. It didn't actually feel that big of a difference. There's no sending the paper to the printer and that stress and anxiety. I do not miss that. But, the like kind of finality of that paper. But it is kind of wild when I think about that. Is that marked a huge change in a career? You really look at that closely, evolution wise.
Interesting. I have so many thoughts. The first one that comes to mind is like the evolution of our mindset as like a metaphor. It's like, are you the newspaper, the magazine, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, like, and whatever's coming next, right? It's like, I mean, it is such a good point though. Like, I feel like I'm not Facebook generation necessarily. I'm definitely Instagram generation. TikTok just seems way too cool for me. Like I've tried to get on
Cool enough to
TikTok,
be on
and I'm
TikTok.
just like, I am just not this cool. Like, that is a whole nother level of cool.
I think what's so interesting about TikTok compared to Instagram is like people do like to compare them, but they're so completely different, and it's almost like a whole different section of social media where I think of social media as this platform to get out information. Like the anxiety I have whenever I hit post, I think, does this have any information? Does this have any importance in people's life? Like, is it going to educate somebody on something? Is it going to provide information on like a new restaurant in Houston? Is it going to convince someone to read this book that I really love? Like, what value do I have in this post? And I just think about it too much. I just like overthink about it. And I'm like, I can't post it unless it has that value. TikTok, no offense, the value is different. The value system's different. Like, I don't think people are posting these hilarious cat videos that come up on my feed pretty much exclusively. Aren't thinking like, am I providing valuable information?
The two of y'all probably have the same feed if it's all about cats.
Right? It like that, but I also don't open TikTok to like get information about anything. So it's this whole different need we need as humans, this entertainment value, this like lighthearted, kind of avenue that I particularly use TikTok for is a distraction and entertainment. Whereas I don't open Instagram for that necessarily. Or like, I don't think about my content strategy as being just fluffy entertainment.
So that's a good lead into what my second thought was, as they were like converging thoughts hitting me in the brain at the same time, which is always a fun moment. I was thinking about the role that curiosity's played, right? As we talked about when we first kicked off, but almost like take us on a journey where, you know, you have this idea, right? Or I don't know, something sparked something. I mean, that's what I'm hoping you'll share with us. And then that leads you to say, oh, I'm going to set up an Instagram account, and that's going to then become It's Not You, It's Me. And then, and then like, that's going to be what it is, right? Or the cool stuff that you're doing with book club and Innovation Map as well, right? It's just like that process seems pretty magical. So like, take us on that journey of like idea to like platform to like content to like inspiration.
Yeah, well, It's Not You came out of I didn't have a job. I graduated college, did a program at NYU for magazine publishing, and was still freelancing and had no opportunities for full-time employment. And I just kind of thought about like, you know, what's the content I want to create and how do I create a platform for that kind of thing? And so that's the origin story of that. And then like kind of how it took off is a whole other thing. But most recently I did start during the pandemic when everybody had a little bit extra free time on their hands for the most part. If you work from home and your social life has been canceled kind of thing, like I was in. And so I started reading more. I got sick of Netflix a few months in, and I was like, okay, like I'm going to read. I've always been a big reader. And really it just came out of this idea that there were a couple accounts on Instagram that I followed for book recommendations. And I was like, well, I'm reading more, so why don't I just, I know how to make an Instagram account. And so then I just was like, well, this is where I'll keep my reviews. So because I know eventually people will ask me for recommendations. Like, I don't know what's going on up here if I'll remember all of them. So I'm going to use this platform as that. And then I realized it's actually a whole corner of the internet is book influencers. And so I kind of got immersed into that pretty quickly and realized, oh no, this is like a thing where I can establish myself as a reputable book influencer. And that kind of filled that need that I wasn't getting so much during the pandemic of going out and experiencing Houston and posting about that. So it kind of was a nice way to be a little bit, still provide information via social media, but it's also something that will also connect me to people who are also doing the same thing all over the world. So it's kind of cool. But that was really that. I kind of accidentally stumbled into the world realistically. I mean, in both platforms. I was like, I didn't know this would be a whole thing, but here I am. And I have, I think, just over 8,000 followers on my book account now, which, essentially happened over 18 months at this point.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy, but there was clearly a need for content about the books I read.
And what are y'all up to on It's Not You now? That's grown a lot.
I think almost 80.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a lot of humans that you get to influence.
Yeah, it is.
And then like the aspect of voice, right? Like voice comes to mind. I think with curiosity, at least what I'm learning, which is it's been a cool journey, right? Because I haven't always been the most curious human. Like, I feel like I was always asked to give my perspective on things or like give answers. I wasn't really asked a lot about questions that I had. And so I know like this journey for me has been pretty transformative because it's helped me flip my own mindset and build new neural pathways where I go from like everything's answers that I'm giving to questions that I'm asking. But what I've been learning is, and I'm sure Scott shares this as well, is there's like a certain incubation period of the thinking, right? The curiosity being applied into questions. Then there's this next phase of voice. And I think voice is a really important part of that. And so for you, voice is a huge part of what you get to do with your platform. Like, what's some of the most exciting stuff that you feel like you get to do across your mediums? Doesn't need to be a specific platform to really like bring voice to life.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting concept because I specifically went into journalism because, like, yes, I'm writing the words, but I'm telling someone else's story. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily, I'm not writing a first person narrative about me. I'm interviewing people and telling their story. I'm giving a voice to someone else through whatever platform that would employ me as a journalist, kind of thing. And so the world of an influencer really kind of has never been, like intuitive for me, because I'm so about like who's telling me the story that I'm then presenting. But when you're an influencer, it's about you and what you like and what you have to say about X, Y, and Z. So that was kind of interesting and not kind of second nature for me. I would say at first, but I still think it's a little bit hard to put me at the center of a story when I'm just so used to the journalism side of things of telling someone else's story. I always say that for It's Not Hugh, our main character is Houston. It's not about me. I'm maybe a vessel. I'm telling you why you should enjoy this restaurant, this workout studio, or whatever. But it's not about me.
Yeah, It's Not Hugh is like all the reasons why Houston is my favorite color.
Yeah,
it's like every single one. There we go. I'll just start pointing people there. Be like, this is why. Go to It's Not Hugh. Clearly,
yeah, just scroll for like 5 minutes.
Done.
Houston sounds great.
I love that.
One of kind of the underlying premises that we've got in terms of our journey is kind of, as Brad's touching on it, so to kind of build on it a little bit, is this ability to kind of ask questions. And that's a skill set that doesn't come naturally to a lot of people, and is one, though, that can be learned. And one is somebody who tells people stories and talks to people in all different kind of corners of kind of the innovation space. Can you share a little bit about what you've learned along the way in terms of what makes a good question or a bad question? Like maybe a little bit of the tactics on kind of what you've seen kind of unpack get to the state that you want to get to. You know now what good story versus maybe less interesting story, et cetera. You've had an opportunity to talk to a lot of interesting folks. Like, yeah, a little bit of your learnings and perspective around that.
I think it's funny because I'll like prepare for a podcast interview. I probably shouldn't reveal this, but like in 10 minutes, if I'm familiar enough with, somebody or a company or something like that.
You're ahead of us, at least.
Yeah, that's a lot of time. Well, you taking notes, Brad?
I mean, like, I
prepare
am
10 minutes.
I don't know if it's I think it's type A, where I'm like, I have to know where things are going. I have to like and I hate to be like, if I'm listening to someone say something and I'm going to be like, what do I ask next? So I'm like, I have the question so I can actually pay attention to, at least on the podcast. But if I'm doing an interview that's not going to be uploaded as an MP3 or whatever, like if it's the recording is just for my annotations later, I get to really have a conversation. I don't think too hard about like what I'm going to ask them. But I have learned, I think business journalism sounds a little boring, and I kind of agree. It's like you usually do kind of have a structure. You know what the story is going to be. Your conversations with people are just kind of supplemental to like really build out the story. But what I've learned writing about startups, especially in terms of what I do a lot on Innovation Map, which is, almost like a startup feature. Like the story is only about this one startup, maybe how they got started. Maybe there usually is like a news peg to it. Like they just raised some money, or they're growing their team, or they have a new iteration of their technical programming or whatever it is. Yeah. But what I've learned is a lot of people don't have first of all, startups are founded by people who are really passionate usually about their technology and the solution they're providing and their company in general. It's very common to hear founders refer to their startup as their baby. So it's like, it's very personal when you're talking to somebody about their company. And sometimes they don't necessarily know how to do an interview. This is their first interview and I'm their first, interviewer. So it's a little more pressure in that way. Whereas most of the time in business journalism, it's like people have been media trained and they know what to say. And it's just kind of supplemental interview. But so it's a lot of pressure. And I enjoy that in a way because it's much more personal and it feels closer to that original interest that I had as being a journalist and telling people's stories. So it's really fun to get to write those stories. And it doesn't happen too often where I get to write a story and I'm like, I'm really proud of that. This person is so interesting and they're really passionate about their technology. And so when those happen, I'm like, I love that. I love that for them. I love that for me.
Super
But yeah,
cool.
it's a lot of pressure though. Like I said, it's to when I'm talking to somebody and I'm like, the story's cranking out in my head. I'm like, oh, this is how I'm going to start it or whatever. And I'm like, will they like it? Do they like that I talked about, their bad first date that then led to them creating a dating app? Like, but I think that's also what makes good journalism is the people element of it.
It's
And
really
the discovery.
humanizing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the being able to unpack and discover sort of the nuances of humanity and individualism, I think is something that is a bit of what we're on this journey to help people kind of get a better, build better muscles around how to do that, because it's so, our consumption of media and our human interaction is so condensed from what it has historically been, and the speed of those changes, our sort of brain power and evolutionary background isn't keeping up with that. And so we don't have the time and the attention to spend to sort of get to know individually the humans around us. And so we make these sort of quick catch kind of decisions around how we will think about or interact. And so just a not only a mindset around being willing to ask questions, but asking open-ended questions and being willing to sort of hear and pull on a thread that maybe you didn't know was there when the conversation started. And as in terms of just some of the tips for listeners and that are looking to get out and kind of practice a bit of that.
Yeah. I mean, that idea, as you said, I think it's both individualism, but also just diversity and inclusivity across different perspectives, belief systems, infrastructures, societies. I mean, that was one of the biggest motivations for Curiosity is we have what appears to be or feels like a quite polarized society at the moment. Politically is definitely one aspect of it, but I think it goes beyond that to just our day-to-day lives and the interactions that we have with other humans. To at some point we forgot to celebrate diversity and different kinds of voices and perspectives and being able to have like dialogue and discourse and ask questions and like learn and grow from one another. I think there's something super powerful about that. And instead, it feels like we live in this alternative universe where we get fragmented realities that are pretty microscopic, but that to us, because of the mediums where we're getting information being fed to us, or we're engaging or interacting or sharing information, is the whole truth. And I think that my hope, one big hope here, is that Curiosity allows us to kind of open our minds to be curious again and ask questions and celebrate the fact that someone believes something fundamentally different than I do. I think that's a beautiful thing. And so we definitely want that to hopefully inspire other humans to, in that moment when, you hear something that maybe you see a different perspective of, or you believe something different, when you feel like that like rush of emotion and endorphin just about to explode through your mouth, like pause and take a breath and maybe ask some questions and learn before just subjectifying that perspective.
I think as recently as like 20, 30 years ago, humans operated in their kind of networks, right? And those were like physical networks that you had your people that you worked with, you had the people in your neighborhood, you had your family, like the people you went to school with, your close friends, but those are very insular. You know them in person, you've spent time with them in person. And as the internet has equipped people, the world is now very worldly, and we can connect with people all over the world. And I think that's great to an extent, but instead of, it's opened up these new digital networks that I think don't have as strong as a connection. You're more removed from this person because you've never met them in person. And so then they're not a real kind of human to you. They have less value, I think, just because you don't have that physical connection to them. So I think it's really great that we can see how people live all around the world, but it's almost like it's weakened that human to human connection because it's digital. So I think it's great, but it's a double-edged sword where you're like, okay, but they're still humans, and it's also allowed us to be like, whoever lives next door to you, you don't have any control over that, I don't think, in any situation. So you are exposed to that person in person every day, out of your control. But on the internet, you decide who you interact with, and you're probably picking people who you can relate to in some sense. So then, as great as it is that you can access humans from all around the world, you're still probably being selective, and you're putting these people in a bubble with you, which I think contributes to the divisive state that we're in now. It's like we didn't used to get to really decide who was around us at all points in times, but on the internet, you do. Is it good or is it bad?
Yeah.
It's an interesting point, because you're also stripped back the physical interaction, like you're saying, the facial responses, the tone of voice, etc.
And just like smelling people's endorphins.
That whole that connection. It's literally just the
all
words on a
five
page.
senses are activated when you're doing human to human interaction in some capacity. Typically, maybe not taste. That would be a little weird. But most of our senses are activated in human to human interaction. And that's trust, that's confidence, that's bond, that's relatability. That's our willingness, I think is the right word. Our willingness to listen and learn more readily, which is one of the most interesting things I think about what social media has done, just from a more behavioral lens, right? So one of the major correlations to behavior shaping, right, is frequency over time. And so if I have a high level of frequency over a certain amount of time, whatever that amount of time might be, to change a behavior, it takes 3 months, for example, but we're going on many, many years at this point of changing behavior, and frequency and time have played a critical role in that, right? So the behaviors that we have today through social media, it's now a learned behavior. And so that behavior doesn't just exist anymore within a social platform. It's now kind of manifested itself into the physical world. And you see evidence of it where people we speak differently than I think we typically spoke in a face-to-face interaction before social media was as much of part of our life as it is today. And I think to your point, it's this is not an us versus them, human versus machine conversation. I believe every tool has an opportunity to do beautiful, magical things, and every tool sometimes can do less than awesome things. But I think what's really powerful is being aware that this is a tool, and it does have the ability to reshape our narrative, our perspective, our point of view. But to the point, and I share all that because you said something earlier that really resonated with me. And I would describe it almost as like you humanize people's stories. And by doing that, you really elevate their voice. So I'd love to hear a little more from you on how do you go about doing that? How do you go about having this conversation with another human being and really seeing them as a human being, and all their passion and all their excitement and all their technology is the best thing that's ever happened, and really bring forward that human voice?
I think most of the time it's pretty easy because people are people first before they're a founder or, whatever. That is the reason that I'm interviewing them. And so people have a very people connection. Even if I'm just talking to somebody on the phone, usually I can pick up their energy and excitement. So I think that's pretty easy. But I also usually have a game plan when I go in to tell a story. Like, it's this type of story. So I know I want this, and I want to know the answers to these questions. And then just go in with those goals, but then treat the interview as a conversation and let it go where it needs to go. I mean, sometimes on my busy days where I'm like, okay, I can crank this out in a 20, maybe 30-minute call, and then I can write the story up real fast and hit publish. And when I'm responsible for publishing 3 stories a day. Sometimes I need that, those quick stories. But if I go in with that game plan, I love being surprised where I'm like, oh, I didn't know this. Like I didn't know that this was going to be a part of a story. So whatever game plan kind of bare bones kind of structure I had for the story, I'm going to have to throw that out the window because, this information is much more important. And I always look at, you think of a news story and whether it's a feature or breaking news as an inverted pyramid, you have your most important information at the top. Well, even if it's a feature and there's not necessarily like breaking news associated, I still think that sometimes the most important part of that story is, the people part of it. Maybe my intro is going to start at the beginning where this individual had this idea based off of their own experience to start this company and provide this service for people who were also going through what they were going through. And so I think, starting with that anecdotal type of intro is important because, again, people are people first. And so an individual reading that is going to identify with that versus me just starting cold and being like, this company does this and they're raising money or whatever, like the story is. So,
and it's like that relatability factor feels like super critical to that as well.
I know. I mean, and there's people solving problems in Houston that I firsthand experience. And that's really exciting when I get to write that story where I'm like, I've been this person. Like, I didn't have an idea for a company because I'm not an entrepreneur, but this person did, and they created a technology that is solving that. So those types of stories are always really fun for me.
You have this unique opportunity to kind of put your curiosity into a display case for kind of others to check out and react to and comment on, and you have kind of a exposure to kind of an interesting feedback. I've got sort of 2 questions, and we can address one or both or none of them. Is
you can just stiff arm us.
Just sort of, are there things that you are passionate about or that you spend time on that don't have that display case that you particularly enjoy and kind of think about, but are more kind of like you do them for you, not that you don't do the other things for you as well, but like that are a bit different, and maybe nascent things or things that you've just kind of enjoyed.
Do I have any hobbies that I don't brag about?
Right.
Honestly, I don't think I do. Like I am really pretty much everything I do is pretty well documented. You can tell by the literal tens of thousands of photos on my phone. But yeah, I do. Reading did start as that. Like it was definitely something. But when you're passionate about something and you don't want to talk about it, like I can't relate to that, because that's exactly what happened. Is I really loved talking about books, and then I like turned to my friends who don't read, and I'm like, I can't talk to you about books, so I'm going to talk to people on the internet. Yeah. No offense. Like I have been in a book club for over 7 years now, and we read a book a month, and that's great. But I read much more than that, and I have all these other books that I want to talk about. It's great that I can talk about this, one book a month with this group of friends. So then I joined more book clubs, and I made my book Instagram and stuff. So it's like, yeah, I really like talking about it. I think one thing I get to talk about with like friends, and everyone's different in this kind of aspect of your life, but I really love working out at different studios, and I have ones that I now pretty much exclusively go to. And so it's kind of nice to be part of those little communities, because they are communities. Like you're sweating next to someone 3 times a week. And you kind
build some community right there.
Yeah, you
Physical,
really do. I mean,
smelling sweat.
I went to a spin studio for like, I think 3 years. And those are some of my friends like right now. People are like, how did you meet? I'm like, we worked out together, or she was my spin instructor, and now we're neighbors and we hang out weekly. You know what I mean? So that's kind of nice. And I don't really post about those because you can't. That's like, that's my me time to, check the box if I worked out, I'm a good person today, and but also like mentally escape for 45 minutes to an hour. So
your next platform will be all about exercise. It sounds like.
But that's the thing is like, I know that's not going back to like what I'm posting has to have value. I don't have that much I go to the same places. There's nothing new.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And I am by no means a fitness expert. So I have no value to give people on this like topic. But it is still very important to me. A big part of my life. I mean, I work out daily if all goes to plan. So I don't even.
You could go try every gym in Houston.
But I don't want to. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to. I should.
Someone
That'd be
should.
great content. But
That
like,
would be cool. It would be nice for someone to go on that journey. I'd like to see through their eyes.
But have you ever gone to a new studio somewhere you've never been before? I'm sure you have. But like, you go to somewhere new and you're like, I don't know where to put my bag.
Yeah.
I don't know who this person is. Wait, this isn't actually that hard. Or
It's like
I think
the
I'm
first day
doing
of
this
school.
wrong.
Yeah.
I don't love that. I mean,
Yeah, it's
I'll
true.
do it. Every once in a while, I'm like, I'm interested in this new type of class, trampoline class, where you work out on a personal trampoline, and it's called Bounce. And it was great for like one time. Like I was like, this is great. This is cool. I'll blog about it. But I like the structure, and I also feel like in fitness, you have to stick to something to actually see results. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do Pilates, and I'm going to do it 3 times a week until I can do every single thing this Pilates instructor is telling me to do, which still not happened, but it will one day. But I'm like, I have these kind of goals that you need to like improve on and stuff. So that's where I really like to see myself change with a specific type of working out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's that thing where I'm like, it'd be great to provide this value of all the different studios, all the different types of working out that you can do in Houston. And I do that to some extent, but it's never going to be something I dedicate a lot of time to because it's personal and I want to do the thing that's right for me versus the rest of Houston.
So
for
along
this
that,
one thing.
that thread leads me to sort of my second question.
Okay.
Again, you can stiff arm this question is, are there things that are on the horizon that are sort of either on the back burner now or kind of areas that you've kind of observed and seen like, hey, I would do something there or look at something here or, another, I'm glad that you brag about your hobbies because the things that you're interested in or doing are interesting to me and I benefit from it, the value that you add. But anything that's sort of cooking that you're willing to talk about?
I don't have any like one thing that I want to do that's kind of new, but I was thinking about this because everyone does the new year. You're like, what are my resolutions? And I took a step back from making these resolutions, but I actually do have one though. Now that I'm thinking about this, I was like, I'm just trying to be better across the board is kind of my idea. Like you pick a word, a group of my friends, we all picked a word. And so I picked the word.
Oh my gosh, I was about to ask you if you picked a word. Skylar and I picked words. Go. What's
Okay,
your word?
my
I'm
word
so excited.
Is flourish. Like that's the goal, is to flourish. Because I think that we all want to do new things on a new year. You're like, I'm going to finally do this. I'm going to finally do that. But I felt like between 2020 and 2021, I kind of just like lost momentum across the board or whatever. Like I feel like I was failing just based off of my various email inboxes. I'm like, I'm failing here, I'm failing there. I'm like, I'm behind on this, I'm behind on that. And so rather than have some grandiose thing that I want to accomplish that's new and not already on my plate, like just be better at all the things that I'm doing. So to flourish across the board. But I do have like a not so secret passion for like writing fiction. Like I've never done it, but I would love to do that one day, is to actually be a published author of a book that I would want to read. So I'm going to write it.
And is that like a middle grade fiction book or like where do you think that would land or like, hey, I just want to write a piece of fiction. It doesn't matter sort of what the audience might be.
One of my favorite genres of book is thriller suspense novels. And I'm very, very picky about which ones I like. Like I'll read any thriller, unless it's a series because I have commitment issues, but like any standalone thriller I'll read. But I'll be really picky about it. If the villain is obvious or if I can guess every twist or, if the writing is not good, but the plot's good, I'm like, no, you gotta have both kind of thing. So I think that would be an interesting type of book to write, and that I would feel like I would, because I'm so critical, I think, I should be able to do it right. But really it's just been me putting off starting because I'm like, I don't want to mess it up because I'm so picky. I know other people are. or whatever.
If a
but-
few starts though, like do like
I
in
have
terms
a
of
really
ideas or
great
kind of
idea.
premise?
I have a
Okay,
really good
okay.
idea. It's just a matter of, like I said, the sitting down and writing to the standard that I have is the biggest
Can we
part.
get a teaser, like first heard on Curiosity?
No, because someone's going to take it and write it faster than I can because
Wow,
I can't.
That's fair.
I'm
That's fair.
dragging my
we
feet.
first heard on Curiosity that there will be a teaser at some
Also,
point
with my last
about
name,
Natalie's
Harm's
fiction.
the
with my
thriller.
last
Yeah,
name,
it's
I'm
gonna be awesome.
obviously a thriller writer. Like, obviously.
Right.
Naturally.
Right.
I'm
That's
not a
exciting.
thriller fan.
What were y'all's words? You're not a thriller fan?
No,
Do you? Oh, you don't.
I just no.
You don't like
It's
being
too
scared?
No,
Oh,
not
weird.
at all.
Well, to be
Sky
fair,
loves all the thrillers and the murder books and all the creepy stuff. Like, she is here for it.
I think
Y'all
what's-
probably share a lot of the same books.
Probably. I think what's so interesting about thrillers though is you have to have you get tied into these characters and you put yourself, I think most readers do this too though, is like you put yourself into the character's shoes. And so you are the main character maybe, or you're one of the characters, you're part of the story as you're
problem
reading.
solving alongside. Yeah.
And so it's completely addicting to be a part of a thriller as it kind of unfolds. And so sometimes I read them and I'm not like necessarily connected in that way, but the ones that I can actually connect to and like get me hooked to where I can't put it down, stay up late into the night reading, those are going to be thrillers more than they're going to be like a rom-com or historical fiction. I'm going to be like, I can't connect to this in that personal way. I'm still fascinated by the story, but yeah, that's why I was like, and
Just signing up for an experience.
yes.
That way.
And so I think that's probably how I'll write a book is it'll be very like, I am this character. This is my story.
Take on the persona of the character. I love your word, by the way. Flourish is it's a beautiful word. To answer your question, my word is good.
Okay.
And the reason I chose that word is because I want to experience all that is good in this world, and I want to share and kind of bring good energy into the world and just be a steward of more of the wonderful things that we do have in this world, rather than always focusing on or being fed information about that which is less than awesome. Because I think I often tell people, every human on any given day is awesome, more than awesome, or less than awesome. But I think that our brains naturally gravitate to the moments when we're less than awesome and really get fixated on that. So I want to try to keep my mindset and my vocabulary and conversations more to the awesome and more than awesome, and just bring more good energy into the wonders of humanity, because there's a lot of beauty that we overlook.
Yeah.
And what's funny is Sky's word was energy. And so you put it together, good energy kind of fit really.
One of my
really
friends
magically.
was energy.
That's
a good one.
It is a good one.
Good is a good one.
Good is it's good energy.
Yeah.
Sky,
Like
did
that.
you have a word?
I guess it's up to me. I'm sort of committing to one now. I love the exercise, and I've done it historically. And mine's in the same vein, I think, is just the word live. And there's a lot of life that doesn't fall into the category of living if you're not careful. And so I think that for me, the priority is to do more spontaneous kinds of things, more living. So I think that is a focus.
Yeah, that's a good one. Because it's you're being alive, you're living, but it's like, are you doing the things that you want to do with that life at every moment? Because it's like, it's so easy to just, I'm just gonna sleep in today. I'm gonna skip this thing that I was planning to do or whatever. It's like I can do it later or whatever. It's like, no, be intentional and
be present. And I think that's probably, for me, I've spent a lot of my life sort of grinding through the present for some future state. And I think a lot of us do that. There's this kind of hope or promise for some future. And there's a lot of that we have control of and over, and a lot that we don't have control of. And so being more present, and so that is for sure something that's on my mind. I've got 4 kids, and they're all in school now, and there's like a lot that they're getting into that is an opportunity for me to be sort of more of a present parent versus maybe sort of how I've thought about that in the past. So
yeah, it's easy to take for granted, I think,
Oh, for sure.
So
Absolutely. I was thinking through like the exposure that you get to so many different kinds of people, directly or through social media. I wanted to ask, it's sort of like, I want you to speculate a little bit about like, I don't know if it's like how to phrase the question exactly, but it's like, I think I'll contain it to sort of the city of Houston and not like speculate on humanity. Like, where are we going as like a group of living beings? But like, here
if
in
we want to
Houston-
go there, we can.
I mean, I'm just gonna say, watch Don't Look Up on Netflix, because that is the
Fantastic.
thing that has
It
been
is so.
messing with my brain
That is such
since I
a
watched
wild
it.
film. Oh
Oh.
my gosh, I was
That is
actually
where-
thinking about it today on the drive over
I think
here.
about it
I don't even
all
know
of
why.
the time. I've annoyed so many of my friends who are like, "Yeah, it was okay." I'm like, first of all, you're wrong.
Oh, they're definitely wrong. That movie was very, very well done.
Yeah,
The movie was insane.
and it was a thinker too. And I watched it by myself, and I just was like, I have no one to talk to about this. I need to talk to somebody.
Oh my gosh.
It was wild.
It was
Anyways,
wild.
but that is.
I also thought about Ted Lasso while we were talking too. Just the eternal optimism that he brought to the world. Like,
love that show.
I mean, it's amazing. I think we're all ready for a little more optimism, which is maybe why good became my word.
Mm-hmm.
Sky goes, why did you pick good?
He's like disappointed in you.
Yeah. So I explained my logic, and I was like, I don't know. Like, for some reason, what stood out to me is like, God made the world and said that it is good. And I'm like, I think this world has a lot of beauty in it. And like, yeah, it's not perfect. Like, in many senses, we're kind of a hot mess right now, but there's also a lot of like wonderful things that we forget. Like, somebody on my team sent me all the cool things that happened in 2021. It's like this list. There's some insane stuff that happened that like I don't think anyone knows about, like advancements in quantum computing that never got discussed. And I'm like, why aren't we, like, I get we need to talk about things where there's some issues, because there are some real deep rooted issues for sure that we need to expose and like learn about and work together to solve for. There's also like some really badass things that have happened too. Like, we could talk about both,
Yeah.
So I think I just tangented it a little bit out of passion, but
I know,
nonetheless,
but
Don't Look Up was so good.
Yes, so good. But one of my kind of latest binges that it's been like TV show, but also book, is The Good Place, which is an amazing show that I think has some Ted Lasso vibes of this. Like,
Ooh, I haven't seen this yet.
Okay, so I mean, it's
jotting that down.
Underrated, kind of, but the same. One of the writers from The Office and Parks and Rec created The Good Place, and he also wrote a book.
Cool.
And it's kind of, the premise is moral philosophy, which is just a lot to handle. And so he kind of approaches it in this very easy to handle way, a sitcom, right? Like a 4-season show that's super easy to watch. I'm only about halfway, not even.
Demystifying philosophy. Now,
well,
that's
his,
ambitious.
You got to check it out.
So,
I won't ruin it. Like, it is an extremely satisfying series, the way that it's put
very
together.
good. And I just keep like, yeah, one more episode, fine. Like, I'm hooked. But I read his book first, which I don't think is what he expected to do. But basically, to create The Good Place, is he did a bunch of deep dives. This is Michael Schur, who did a bunch of deep dives into moral philosophy, like everything from modern philosophers to ancient philosophers, and all of them, they have conflicting theories on what makes a good person. Lying is always bad, or if lying brings pain, or if telling the truth brings pain to someone, then you are morally obligated to lie to them to not cause that pain. Like, which one's right? Lying's always bad, or there are opportunities for white lies that can do better than the truth could. So, but that's what his whole book is about, is like these concepts of, if you punch your friend in the face, is that always bad? Or is there a time where that's good? I'm messing this up, but the whole book, it's called How to Be Perfect. And it's like the subheadline.
It's good to be punched in the face. Sounds like a great title for one of the shows.
Right. And like the whole show like tackles different issues too. But the subtitle of the book is, it's hilarious. It's like the correct answer to every moral question or something like that, where it's like, no, there's not a correct answer, but like, let's talk about it. And so I listened to it on an audiobook, but now that I'm watching the show, I'm like, I'm going to have to re-listen to that book, because now I'm like going to have the context of how he tackled it in the show.
Yeah. It's like
So you're optimistic about humanity.
Honestly, I guess, but only because now I feel like I have to learn more and more about moral philosophy to be able to like be worth all the time I've spent listening to this book and watching this show, and having those things. Cause it's like the typical types of moral philosophy challenges of like you're in a trolley and it's about to hit and kill 5 people, but you could pull a lever and there's only one person over here. Do you pull the lever, which is then intentionally killing someone versus accidentally killing 5 people? But one person is one person versus 5 people is 5 people. And it's like, well, no, I don't know.
Wow.
So that's where I'm like, oh no, this has opened a whole world.
I'm going to use some ingenuity and find another alternative where everyone lives.
You can't. But then there's like,
I can.
I mean, but that's the thing. It's like,
I beg to differ.
but then it's like you add in all of the different.
creative.
You add in all the different layers. They're all strangers. No,
Scrappy.
you know the one person, and the one person is someone you hate, and then you're like, well, you're intentionally killing this person you hate, or that one person is someone you know and love, and then you're going to kill the 5 strangers.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So this is the trip that I've been on where I'm like, oh no, I don't want to. I never thought about this kind of stuff, but
so don't hate anyone. That's like number one. that's what I'm hearing. Because then in that scenario, it changes the game a little bit.
Yeah, you gotta watch the show.
Apparently,
you gotta see how they approach the
I think
trolley
there's
problem.
a spin-off episode here where everybody finishes The Good Place and we come back on and we debate some moral philosophy.
Yeah, I'm here for some moral philosophy. Get into some stoicism while we're at it. Sounds amazing. Love it.
Committed.
Yeah. Stay stoic and keep rocking.
But I love that there's just like so many things like that out. This, to go back to the purpose of this podcast of curiosity, is it's like my curiosity is piqued in moral philosophy. And now I'm like, well, I can't just be like, finish the show, finish the book. And it's like, no, maybe I'm going to look into if there's a podcast on this. It's like these types of things, like it was a show, it was a book, but there's so much more, like kind of deep diving into that.
Is there a thriller novel premise here with some moral philosophy threads that maybe get integrated?
That would be, I'm sure it exists already. Of just like
there could be like I don't know what you would call the character necessarily. I was going to say like the heroine, but that may not be the case. So you have the character, the lead character, and maybe they are like a moral philosophist student, but they're also like in a situation
caught up in,
and they're having to, they're wanting to use the light and the guidance of moral philosophy, but they also are like a serial killer or something.
Yeah. Well, isn't that like Dexter, where he like kills people who are bad? Well, I did read one book, and it's called They Never Learn. I forgot the author's name, but it is literally like she murders people, but she has a great reason. So, and where does that go? And you're like, so as a reader, you're conflicted because you're like, you're a serial killer, but like I see where you're coming from. And you're like, and I'm like,
it humanizes it.
Yeah, it really does. But no, I would think that's probably like a murder's bad.
That whole construct, like someone taking another human's life, it's pretty heavy. And like if you really like when you really break it down, like I was talking with someone recently, it was a very deep conversation, as I like to have, but we were talking about some moral philosophy, and it was like, someone breaks into your home. I'm like, yep. They're like, you have a gun and they have a gun. What do you do? And I'm like, I'm not going to kill them. I'm just not. Like, I don't want to take another human's life. What are you going to do? They're about to shoot you or your family. And I'm like, find an alternative. Like, I don't know. Like, is there not another option? Like, are we that devolved as a society where we can't figure out a better path? I mean, I know it's a big question. Like, I'm not blind to say, like, in every scenario that's going to happen. But, like, man, is there a better way? Then you go to, like, systemic of, like, education from 0 to 5. And if we could fix that, we could probably fix most of humanity. And then you wouldn't have to get into the encounter where someone feels the need to break into someone's home and rob them because they don't have a meal to eat. So there's that. So it's a very big matrix. I mean, we could talk about that for probably days. We could do like a 24-hour
like a
podcast in the metaverse about moral philosophy.
Well, and that's, I think the conclusion of everything we've just talked about is that it's a gradient. There's not necessarily universal wrongs and rights. And so that's what's fascinating is like, how do people nowadays approach those like types of, is this wrong? Is this right? And how did people approach that 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago? Like, are we evolving, or has that stayed the same, that we're still in this gray area and we pretty much all agree that like this one thing is wrong and this one thing is right? But I think with kind of the cancel culture of the world, not to bring it to this, but like you see that there are things that we can all agree are wrong, and then some things that maybe are a little less wrong, but we still treat it the same way as being completely wrong. And so I think that's not necessarily new, but it's on a grander scale now.
Yeah. And then you
wild.
introduce laws of nature like gravity. I mean, it's hard to argue gravity, right? I was having a similar conversation with someone recently, and that's what we were talking about. We were talking about just the complexities of, good, bad, right, wrong, et cetera. And like, does that even exist? But then when you introduce like some things that are just fundamental fact, like gravity, it's hard to challenge that, because we know that if we step off the side of a mountain, we will fall. Like, even if we, and so we talked about, what if you introduce technology? It's like, well, technology isn't eliminating gravity. It's just giving you the ability to overcome the natural law's limitations, but that doesn't mean the natural law no longer exists. So like, that philosophical perspective, I've always found super fascinating. Like, I think some things just are, and it's almost like there's like a level of like appreciation for and gratitude for that which is and that which is not. Again, getting very meta, which is where I love to live. So I will digress from that.
My head hurts. No, I'm just kidding.
I know we've been at it for a long time. This has been a really fascinating conversation. Natalie, really appreciate you having, I feel like you're having me on the show, because I'm like here in the middle, experiencing the guest seat. But it's awesome to have you on the show, and really enjoyed the discussion. Onward